All right, good evening, everyone. Let's begin. So I want to start. The truth is, in these parshios, especially when it comes to Vayigash, there's so much incredible drama and so much incredible, overwhelming stories of reunification. You know, for a long time in the parshos of Bamidbar, in Bereshis, it's been hard to break a smile because the stories have been so heavy. The narrative has been so overwhelming. But now for the first time in this week's parsha, we see the reunification between Yosef and his brothers. Yosef, again, has been upholding this masquerade, this charade, and not revealing his identity to his brothers. That's a whole discussion in and of itself as to why Yosef felt compelled to do that. But in this week's parsha, Yosef comes along and he says, Ani Yosef ha'oda vichai. I am Yosef, is my father still alive? And the process of reunification between the family members ultimately begins. And again, it's an incredible moment. Yaakov Avinu refuses, of course, to at first believe that his son, who he thought was dead for 22 years, is now alive. Yaakov Avinu ultimately comes around. Yaakov goes down to Mitzrayim. The family is reunified. Yosef settles them in Goshen. And although on one hand, this is an incredible cause for celebration, we know on a deeper historical level, this also marks the beginning of Egyptian exile. This is the beginning, ultimately, again, of Klal Yisrael's existence within Mitzrayim, which, of course, ultimately culminates in Egyptian servitude, 210 years of backbreaking slavery, backbreaking servitude. So again, although it's an incredible high point in terms of familial reunification, there's an element of tragic circumstances as well, because you know, again, that this is the beginning of a dark chapter for Klal Yisrael. But I want to draw your attention to one very specific moment. If you take a look at number 1. So the Torah relates that after Yaakov Avinu goes ahead and reveals his identity, you know, it's interesting. Adults and kids always do the same thing. Everyone gravitates to the back of the classroom. So I'm going to point out there are seats up here as well if anybody wants. Good. So an incredible episode, which is Yosef reveals his identity to his brothers, and the Torah says as follows. Number 1, Vayipol al Savari Binyamin Achiv Vayefch, Ubinyamin Bacha al Savarav. Literally, he fell on his brother Benjamin's neck and wept, and Binyamin wept on his neck. So this pasuk is powerful on a variety of levels. First of all, the Torah already told us that Yosef wept. The Torah already told us that the brothers wept. But yet, again, there's an additional weeping. There's an additional exchange of tears between Yosef and Binyamin. So issue number 1 is that why are these two brothers crying more than the others? Issue number 2 is just in the syntax of the verse. Vayipol al Savari Binyamin Achiv. Yosef falls al Savare. How would you literally translate that word? Savare? Necks, plural. Necks, plural. Yosef falls on the necks, plural, of Binyamin. Vayefch uBinyamin bacha al Savarav. And Binyamin cried on his neck, on Yosef's neck. So the second question, the syntax question, which is, what does it mean that Yosef is crying over Binyamin's necks, plural? What does that mean? And first of all, again, the truth is, and the overarching question, which is, the Torah just needs to tell me that they cried. I really don't need to know what? I don't need to know if they cried on each other's necks, if they tried to cry on each other's cheeks, on each other's face. It doesn't make a difference. The goal over here, that it would appear that the Torah is trying to convey an intense emotion. But yet the Torah doesn't just say once, but the Torah says twice that they're crying over each other's necks. So really 3 basic questions. Number 1, why are Yosef and Binyamin crying more together, more than the crying of the collective brothers? Question number 2 is, why does the Torah have to tell me that they're crying on each other's necks? And question number 3 is, why is necks plural by Binyamin? Why does it say that Yosef cried on Binyamin's necks, plural, as opposed to, again, Binyamin crying on Yosef's neck, singular? So I want to show you just a couple of interesting approaches. Take a look at number 2. So the Chizkuni says something so beautiful. The Chizkuni says, Al Savare Mishnetz Dade Hat Savar. So ultimately, again, the way the Chizkuni understands it is, it says that Yosef cried on Binyamin's necks, plural, to teach us what? That Yosef cried on both sides of Binyamin's neck. He embraced him, he cried, then he switched sides. He embraced him on the other side, and he cried there. That's the Chizkuni. Rabbeinu Bachya, number 3, says, Yogi da Kosov, ki Yosef nafal al tzavari Binyamin. Ubinyamin gam ke nafal al tzavaro, keminag achim b'neim em achos, sha'ahavasam aza. So Rabbeinu Bachya says something amazing. The Torah is telling us that Yosef and Binyamin shared a special bond. What was the special bond that they shared? Same father, same mother. Remember again, all of the Shvatim ultimately shared the same father, but again, 4 different women married to Yaakov Avinu. Yosef and Binyamin share the same father, share the same mother. As such, again, there was an incredible, intense connection. Not only that, but you have to understand, both of them also had lost their mother. So not only did they share the same parents, but ultimately, again, they both had that shared common grief of having lost the mother. Not only that, but remember again, who amongst the brothers felt the loss of Yosef most acutely? It was none other than Binyamin. How do we know this? Because go back, rewind a little bit to last week's session. I didn't put this on the sheet, I'll just tell you this outside. If you remember again, before Yosef reveals his identity, and he's talking to his brothers, so he says to Binyamin, tell me a little bit about yourself. How many children do you have? And Binyamin said, Baruch Hashem, I have 10 sons. And Yosef says to him, no, what are their names? And Binyamin goes through all of the names. And Yosef says, that's interesting, I'm well versed in Hebrew. I don't recognize the etymology of these names. And Binyamin explains that each of his sons was named for Yosef. Each and every one of his 10 sons was named for his brother, was named for great traits of his brother, was named for the tragic circumstances. Because remember again, Binyamin did not know what the other brothers did to Yosef. He was not present at the time of Yosef's sale. So Binyamin buys into the same narrative as Yaakov Avinu did, that Yosef was devoured by a wild animal, that he was dead. Binyamin named all 10 of his children in memory of his beloved brother Yosef. So therefore the Mefarshim understand that the Torah is conveying to us an incredibly strong bond between 2 brothers. The reality is, although we don't often think it, there was a very strong bond between all of the brothers. You know, one of the beautiful dynamics in siblings is that you could fight but still love each other. You could even want to kill each other, but still love each other. You could even try to kill each other, but yet still love each other. There is an incredible, unbreakable bond between the brothers. But there was something special between Yosef and Binyamin. 2 boys, because they were boys when they lost their mother. They were young boys when they lost their mother. Heavily dependent on a father. Yosef not knowing what his father felt or did not feel towards him. Remember again, there's a whole sub-dynamic over here as to why Yosef never tried to contact Yaakov during his 22 years in Egypt. That's a different discussion. Binyamin, who for the last 22 years effectively didn't have a father. Why didn't he have a father for the last 22 years? Because remember again, we spoke about this a few weeks ago. Yaakov Avinu confined himself to a perpetual state of Shiva, a perpetual state of mourning. He cut himself off from the world, and to a certain degree, he cut himself off from his family as well, which essentially means Yosef and Binyamin, as crazy as it sounds, were orphans. They were both orphans. And so when they find each other, they see in one another a little vestige of their beloved mother, Rachel Imenu. They see in one another a remembrance of the good old days when Yaakov was engaged, when Yaakov Avinu was happy, and so they cry. And they don't just cry, but they cry, and they cry, and they cry. And when Binyamin's clothing is soaked on one side from Yosef's tears, what does Yosef do? He switches over to the other side. But there's another incredible description here, or another incredible interpretation. If you take a look at number 5, so the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Elazar, there's a symbolic crying that's happening over here. Bacha al shnei mikdashim sha'asidin liyos bechelko shel Binyamin va'asidin licharif. So this is amazing. When Yosef cries over Binyamin, he's not just crying because of tears of happiness, tears of joy, tears of reunification. He's crying over the 2 temples which will stand in the tribal area of Binyamin that will ultimately be destroyed. Ubinyamin bacha al tzavarav. Binyamin cried over Yosef. Bacha al mishkan Shiloh. Sha'asid lios bechelko shayosef asid licharif. And Binyamin cries over the neck of Yosef. We're going to see the neck symbolizing the temple. Ultimately, again, referring to what? The Mishkan. The Mishkan, we know, was the tabernacle, the temporary temple that was erected by Moshe Rabbeinu in the desert, followed the Jewish people for the first 369 years they lived in Eretz Yisrael. It was situated in Shiloh, and it was destroyed. So the Gemara understands that there's something much deeper that is unfolding over here. When Yosef cries over Binyamin, he sees prophetically the two temples which will stand in the tribal portion of Binyamin and will ultimately be destroyed. And so he's crying over the future loss of the temples. Binyamin sees prophetically the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which will remain situated in the tribal area of Yosef and which will be destroyed. And Binyamin cries over that. Incredibly profound. But what does it mean? What does this mean? That Yosef is crying over the two Batei Mikdash, the two temples, which are again literally hundreds of years away. Why are they crying? Binyamin's crying over the Mishkan. What's happening over here? Obviously, whenever you see the rabbis bring down an idea like this, there's a deeper message. Chazal are trying to teach us something. Yosef is crying over the Batei Mikdash, the first Beis HaMikdash, second Beis HaMikdash shall be destroyed. Binyamin's crying over the Mishkan. What does it have to do with the neck? So if you look at the pasuk in Shir HaShirim, so the pasuk says, Shalom Aleich writes in Song of Songs, Shir HaShirim, Kimigdal David Tzavarech. So remember again, Shir HaShirim is a fascinating work because it's written as a love ballad between a man and a woman. And again, the metaphor of human love is used to go ahead and describe the passionate relationship between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. Now, the interesting and somewhat confusing part of Shir HaShirim is that the roles are sometimes reversed over the course of the work. Sometimes God is the man, Klal Yisrael is the woman. Sometimes HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the woman and Klal Yisrael is the man. But the metaphor is very powerful, which is the intense love shared between a husband and a wife, a man and a woman. That's the model, ultimately, again, for the love between Klal Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which I'll tell you something amazing. You know, the Rambam, this is just an aside, but it's an incredible, I think it's an incredible insight in Shalom Bayis, an incredible insight in terms of passionate marriage, which is, so the Rambam writes, we have a mitzvah, V'yahavtas Hashem Elokecha, to love Hashem your God. So everybody focuses, what does this mean? We spoke about this many times, we had this many in the Shiurim, about how can you legislate love? So, okay, leaving that question aside, what does it mean to love God? So the Rambam says something so amazing. The Rambam writes, a person should love God like a man loves a woman. So the Rambam writes, what does that mean? So the Rambam says, just like when a man is in love with a woman, he cannot stop thinking about her. She preoccupies, right? He's preoccupied with her, thinking about her all the time. That's the type of love that a person should have for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Constantly thinking about God, constantly preoccupied. So I'm always amazed by that Rambam, because the Rambam is saying, what is passionate marriage? What is a loving marriage? That you're always thinking about the other. Sometimes it's consciously, sometimes it's subconsciously, but my spouse is always on my mind. That's the type of love we bring to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So therefore, again, Shir HaShirim, so although, again, the stated message is a message of love between a man and a woman, ultimately, again, the metaphor is the love between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and Klal Yisrael. Saying that in number 6, Kimigdal David Tzavarech. So Shlomo Melech writes, your neck is like the Tower of David. That's a compliment. I just want to explain, right? So meaning, what's the idea? So apparently, again, the long neck, I guess, is an attractive feature. So in Shir HaShirim, the man is telling the woman, your neck is beautiful, your neck is long, like the Tower of David. So the Medrash writes in number 7, Mat Savar ze nasun begavo shel Adam, kach Beis HaMikdash nasun begavo shel Olam. Just like the neck, right, is the highest part of man, so to the Beis HaMikdash stands at the highest point in the world. So the Beis HaMikdash is called the neck. Just like the neck is the part of the body which extends highest, so too again the Beis HaMikdash is situated at the highest point in the world, the Har HaBayis. Beautiful. First of all, so before we go on, so just understand, now the symbolism. Yosef is crying over what part of Binyamin's body? The neck. So that's where Chazal understand that if the Torah is going out of its way to tell us that Yosef is crying not over just the neck, but what? Necks, plural. Plural. Why? The neck is a reference to the temple. Yosef is crying prophetically over the first and second temples, which will be situated in the tribal provinces of Binyamin and will be destroyed. Binyamin cries over Yosef's neck. Again, why the emphasis on the neck? The neck is a metaphor, is a reference to the temple. In Yosef's case, the Mishkan, the tabernacle, which was going to sit in Shiloh, which was in the tribal area of Yosef. So they're crying over each other's necks, symbolizing crying over the future loss of the temples, which would stand in their respective tribal portions. There's only one problem with this metaphor. So remember again, the Medrash says that just like the neck is the highest part of the body, so too again the Beis Hamikdash stood situated on the highest part of Eretz Yisrael. There's two problems with this Medrash. Problem number one is, the obvious one, the neck is not the highest part of the body. Right? The head is the highest part of the body. And number two, the Gemara says in number 8, without getting into all the details over here, Amar Abaye, Shma Mina, Ein Eitam Gavoa Mikarka Azara Esrim Mishal Shams. There was a place called Ein Eitam. Ein Eitam, the Gemara says, was 23 amos. So an amos is approximately a foot and a half, 50 feet higher than the courtyard area of the temple, which tells us that what? The Harabayis, the Temple Mount, was not the highest point in Eretz Yisrael, or I should say, was not the highest point even in Jerusalem. So we have two problems with the metaphor. You want to tell me that the temple's like the neck, just like the neck is the highest point in the body, so to the temple is the highest point. A, the neck is not the highest point in the body, the head is. And number two, the Harabais, the Temple Mount, was not the highest point in Jerusalem, either Ein Eitam was. So what's happening over here? So I want to show you that just from this Gemara, from this lesson, emerges something dramatically amazing. Take a look at number 9. I'm going to quote to you two pieces tonight from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, and the Rebbe explains something so beautiful. Number 9, paragraph Aleph. Amnam, Harosh Gava Min Hatzavar. So Lubavitcher Rebbe points out, we know the head is higher than the neck. Aval Yeshna Gam Ma'ala Gidola B'Tzavar Ala Rosh. But you know, the neck has certain superiority over the head. What's the superiority the neck has over the head? Harosh kishala atzmo hu nifrad umuvda miyeser chelki aguf. Now the head is exceptionally important on a variety of different levels. There's only one problem. Without the neck, it's not attached to the body. In other words, the head's influence, the power of the head, the power of everything contained in the head, the mind, the brain, is in the ability to influence the physicality of man, right? But that only happens if the head is attached by the neck. Without the neck, the head may be incredibly wonderful and important, but cannot self-actualize or cannot fulfill its mission. He goes on, Vilu atzavar, dafko b'schus hayoso namach min harosh, karov yoser al haguf, ulakachu mishamish kimemotza, shedarko overes hachius mirosh ashar chelki haguf, v'chein mani garosh el haguf. So therefore, again, here's the power of the neck. The neck may not be the highest point on the body, but the neck is perhaps the most pivotal point to the body. Because think about this for just a moment. A head without a neck doesn't have the ability to impact the physicality of man. Remember again, the head, we often think that our neshama is here, right? We often assume like the neshama sits in the heart. In fact, Chazal tell us the neshama sits in the head. The neshama is not by the heart, the neshama is by the mind, by the brain. So the neshama, everything, my spiritual center, the mothership for spirituality is in my head. My head ultimately, again, should control everything else that goes on in my life, that goes on in my physicality. That's great as long as my head is connected to my body. Without the neck, the head doesn't have the ability to impact my physicality and endow it with the dimension of holiness. Conversely, if I have a body, but there's no neck connecting my body to there's no neck connecting my body to my head, then what am I? I'm an animal. I mean, I might be dead, right? But I'm leaving that aside. I'm an animal. In other words, physicality without thought, physicality without emotion, physicality without spirituality is an animalistic pursuit, is an animalistic life. So something amazing happens. The neck is the shadchan. The neck is the bridge. The neck is the conduit that brings together my spirituality and my physicality. It takes the spirituality that's in my mind, that's in my neshama, that's in my brain, and allows it to permeate my body, and it allows my physicality ultimately, again, to be connected to the spirituality of my mind, and hopefully in that, become holier. Now watch this. What does that have to do with the Beis HaMikdash? So this is amazing. Paragraph Beis. Lochein, dome Beis HaMikdash dafka letzavar. Therefore, the temple of the Beis HaMikdash is just like the neck. How so? Tafkido sha Beis HaMikdash hu laha'ir ulahashpia al kol ha'olam kulo. Gam ha'chilek hayaret biyoser shabo. Lochein lo amad Beis HaMikdash b'makom hagavoa biyoser ela namoch mimenu ma'at. Let me tell you this outside for just a moment. What's the role of the Beis HaMikdash in our lives? Think about this. It's hard for us to relate to this because we've been without a temple for over 2,000 years. But what's the role of the Beis HaMikdash in our lives? The Beis HaMikdash is the neck. The Beis HaMikdash is what allows the head, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to come down to us, and it allows us, the body, to come up to Him. That's the Beis HaMikdash. The Beis HaMikdash is this meeting place between heaven and earth. It's this meeting place between man and his creator. You know, the Beis HaMikdash was a fascinating place because on one hand, it was a physical address, it was a physical place with physical dimensions. But we know it also defied so many of the laws of natural order. For example, the Gemara says that if you look at the dimensions of the Holy of Holies, if you look at the dimensions of the Kodesh HaKadoshim and the dimensions of the Aron of the Ark, they don't work. They don't work, which leads the Talmud to a startling idea, which is Aron Einam en Amida. The Ark just didn't take up physical space. But what does that mean? What does that mean, right? Isn't it Science 101 that mass takes up space? You have mass take Aron Einam en Amida. The Beis HaMikdash was the neck. In this metaphor, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the head. We are the body. The goal of the Beis HaMikdash was to bring down the holiness of God to us and to lift us up to God. Everyone's meeting each other somewhere in the middle. That's why it's not by accident that the Beis HaMikdash was situated on the top of a mountain, on a mountaintop, on Har HaBayis. Why? Because the idea is I'm ascending up to God, God's descending down to me, and we're going to meet each other somewhere in the middle. Just like my neck connects again the holiness and the spirituality of my head with the physicality of my body, the Beis HaMikdash was the neck of the Jewish people, connecting the holiness of God with the physicality and sometimes mundaneness of His chosen people. Now watch this. Turn to number 10 for just a moment. So the Rebbe goes on, and he says something quite beautiful. He says, so what's the message? I mean, this is all very beautiful. This is all incredible. But remember, you see, the beauty of our Torah is that there's never just information. Anything that's brought down in our Torah is to teach us how to live. And not just how to live, but how to live impactful, meaningful, and depthful, I don't know if that's a word, but depthful lives. So this is a beautiful idea of the neck. I got it. Beis HaMikdash is the neck. Wonderful. What's the message for me? And look what the Rebbe says in number 10. Kimo Beis HaMikdash b'Yerushalayim, kach gam Beis HaMikdash ha'ishi shall kol Yehudi. So this is amazing. You know that the power of the Beis HaMikdash is that even in the absence of the physical Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, each of us is a personal temple. And we learn so much from the temple which stood in Jerusalem about how to consecrate and nurture our personal temples as well. So there's a lesson to be learned from the Beis HaMikdash to my personal. What's my personal Beis HaMikdash? It's me. It's you. Each of us is a Beis HaMikdash, is a temple unto ourselves. So listen to this. He says, Tafkido shel Yehudi hu la'asok im ha'olam shalo lios bekesher karov im ha'guf shalo im midosav ha'tivios v'im ha'olam shesvivo. So this is amazing. So it says there was something incredible. Each of us has a head. And in that head, there's a brain. And sitting on top of that brain is an neshama, is an incredible wellspring of holiness, an incredible reservoir of spiritual energy. But you know what the greatest tragedy is in life? That some people spend a lifetime and the holiness remains up here. It remains in my head. and it never filters down to my body. It never filters down to the way that I live. It remains in the abstract. It remains in the intellectual. It remains in the potential, but it never transforms into anything kinetic. It never actually becomes anything. And says the Rebbe something absolutely amazing. In the same way that the Beis Hamikdash served as the neck of the world to bring down the head, the spirituality of God, into this world, and to bring this world up to God, that process has to go ahead and replicate itself within us as well. The problem is so many of us go through lives. I have a healthy body. I have a fantastically healthy head. My neck is totally dysfunctional. The bridge is out. What does this mean, says the Rebbe? Listen to this. There are many, many things that we believe in, right? If you ask a person, so name for me the things that are important to you in life. And again, this is actually, don't name it for me, but name it for yourself. This is actually an incredibly instructive exercise. What are my principles in life? What are my principles? What are the 5 things that are important for me to have in my life? The principles that it's important for me to actualize. The principles that it's important for me to find in my home. The principles with which I want to raise my children. What are the principles? And the truth is, most of us could rattle off the principles we hold near and dear. Where does the challenge come in? Where does the challenge come in? In the execution and implementation. You see, it's easy to rattle off hashkafas. It's easy to rattle off beliefs. The hard part is, am I living those beliefs? Am I living those beliefs? How many times do parents say, I want to raise inspired children? Good. Okay, thank you. I want to raise inspired children. Fantastic. Who doesn't want to raise inspired children? But then the problem is, you'll excuse me, I have to look at my home. Is my home inspirational? Are the number of channels that I have conducive to inspiration? Do the print materials I allow in my home conducive to inspiration? Are the music that's coming through, is that inspiration? And so what ends up happening is, so you'll say, what, I'm a hypocrite? Yeah, we're all hypocrites in different ways. All of us live with inconsistencies. But at some point in time, I have to take a step back and I have to say, it's time to stop espousing and it's time to start implementing. At the end of the day, am I living my life with a disconnect between my head and between my body? Am I living with a disconnect between what I believe to be true, but I'm not really living that? I know in my heart what's true, and I really do believe it to be true. I absolutely believe it to be true, but I'm just failing to launch. It's just not coming through in the way that I'm living. I want an incredibly beautiful and harmonious marriage, yet, I have an uncanny ability to pick up on every single imperfection of my spouse. And not only pick up on it, but what? Of course, very gently point it out, right? Nothing, so, 1 second. If you want shalom bayis, you know what 95% of shalom bayis is comprised of? Your mouth. 3 words. Letting it go. Not everything is a fight. Not everything is a place to draw your line in the stand. Not everything is something that you need to comment on. And chas v'shalom, I'm not just saying this to women, right? I'm saying this is klal gadol. This is klal gadol. So much of shalom bayis is let it go. This annoyed you? Stuff annoys us all the time. Let it go. This Rebbe says something so amazing. We have beautiful heads. We have healthy bodies. Often we're just missing a neck. I believe in A, B, C, D, and E. Fantastic. Show me, not show me. Show HaKadosh Baruch Hu, show yourself. How does it manifest in your life? Torah is important to you? Great. Where is it in your home? Where is it in your daily life? Where is it in your spouse? Where is it in your children? Where is it in all of the decisions you're making for your children? Where does that, because I can't claim it's important if the decisions I'm making run contrary to that. Then somehow my head's here, my body's here, but my neck is missing. And without a neck, God stays here, I stay here. The neck is the bridge between, ultimately, again, our spiritual aspirations, our hashkafas, our outlooks, our wants, our incredible desire to be holy, and our ability to execute and actually put those things into action. So what happens with Yosef and Binyamin? Get ready for this. Skip down to paragraph Gimel. Lo'or hezber zeh, novin madua Binyamin v'Yosef, bachu zeh al tzavarav shel zeh, v'lo zeh al rosho shel zeh. So listen to this. So now what happens? Yosef and Binyamin are crying on what? They're crying on each other's necks. They're crying on each other's necks. Tafkidam shel b'nei Yisrael ba'olam, hu ani lo nivresi el l'shamesh eskoni. I'm just going to read a little bit. So he says something amazing. So essentially, when Yosef and Binyamin cry on each other's necks, the neck represents the ability to put your ideals and your beliefs and aspirations into practice. The neck takes all of the incredible koach I have in my neshama and puts it. So why are they crying on each other's necks? Because what they realized was something amazing. Our family had a neck breakdown. Our family had a neck breakdown. Our family which has so much holiness. Our family which has so much beauty. Our family which believes in respect for one another, in love for one another, in treasuring the differences with one another. And yet what happened? We believed all of these things, but we could not put it into practice. At the end of the day, brother turned against brother. Brother was ready to kill brother. Brothers took their younger, vulnerable brother, stripped him of his dignity, stripped him of his clothing, threw him into a pit to be sold like a piece of property. And so Yosef and Binyamin cry on each other's necks because what they're crying over is, what happened to us? We're the grandchildren of Avram Avinu. What was Avram Avinu's midah? What is Avram Avinu's midah? Chesed. Avram Avinu is the one with the tent that has openings on every single side because there's a place for everyone. There's love for everyone. Yes, we could have disagreements. Yes, we could even have significant disagreements. But there's always a love. There's always a respect. There's always a togetherness. There's always an achdus. And how could it be that we, the grandchildren of Avram Avinu, how could it be that we turned on each other so viciously and so violently? And by the way, there's blame to go around because Yosef was incredibly insensitive as to how he shared his dreams with his brothers. Remember again, Yosef shared his dreams how many times? Twice. Okay, first time you want to say he didn't realize what he was doing. After you see the reaction of your big brothers the first time, conventional wisdom would be, don't share the second dream. But the Torah says, Vunar, he was a little bit immature. Whatever the reason is, he went ahead and he shared the other dream, seemingly rubbing in his brother's face the special affection and attention he received from his father. And the brothers, grown men, mature men. You can't take it that your little brother is annoying. You can't take it that ultimately, again, maybe he's getting more love from his father. Yeah, you know what? Because he's the child of Rachel Imenu. He's the child of Rachel Imenu. So yes, that was the wife that Yaakov Avinu wanted to marry. So get over it. But they couldn't get out of each other's way. They couldn't go ahead and exercise that Abrahamic love to one another. They knew it in their head. They knew it in their mind that you have to love every person unconditionally. And you have to find, there's no halacha that says you only have to love people who aren't annoying. But you could despise annoying people. I mean, life would be a lot easier if you could despise annoying people. That's not the halacha. You have to love everyone. And so what happens? Brothers are reunited 22 years after being apart. Yaakov sat Shiva for 22 years. So much lost time. So many lost opportunities. And what do they cry? They cry over each other's necks. I can't believe that we failed to implement the lessons that we knew to be true. We know we have to love each other. We know we have to care for one another. We know that we have to appreciate the differences in each other. And yet we fail to implement that lesson. And says the Rebbe, the incredible lesson for us is this idea of, are we living life with a head-body disconnect? The goal in life is, if you believe in something and you believe it to be true, then it needs to be manifest in the way that I live, in the way I conduct myself, and in the actions I engage in. But if I believe in something, but it's not showing up in my life, it's not clear through the way I'm living, it's not clear through my behaviors, it doesn't mean my beliefs are insincere. It just means that my neck is not working. The neck might be closed, the neck is down, the bridge is down, and for whatever reasons, my aspirational beliefs are not translating into dynamic life activities. Do you hear the profundity in this idea? In one little act of two brothers crying over each other's necks because they're crying that we could not implement the most basic lessons that have been handed down from generation after generation, from Avram to Yitzchak, from Yitzchak to Yaakov, and from Yaakov presumably to his sons. The lessons we have in our heads, but they couldn't find the way down the neck to the body. And again, the incredible message for us. It's difficult sometimes to look at life and to realize that I'm not necessarily living a life that is reflective of my ideas, ideals, and hashkafas. Because the truth is, the one thing that's important in life is we all live with inconsistencies. And all of us have things that we believe in. I believe in it. I'm just not doing it. But I absolutely believe in it. And that's not being hypocritical. You know what that's called? It's called being a human being. If you're a human being, you live with inconsistencies. If you're a human being, you live with contradictions. But at least I have to be aware of it. I have to be aware. I have to understand my goal in life is that if I believe it, I have to live it. If I believe it, someone, objective person looking at my life, the greatest litmus test is, if someone were to come and spend a day in your life, would they be able to jot down your 5 core life values? If the answer to that is yes, then fantastic. Your head is connected to your body. Your neck is in working order. If the answer is no, it doesn't mean that your beliefs aren't good. Your beliefs are beautiful, but I have to work on repairing the neck. So much of life is trying to figure out how to stop espousing what I believe and how to start actually making it a reality in my day-to-day life. That's lesson number 1. But there's a second lesson. And if you take a look at number 11, this is another incredible idea because there's a follow-up question, right? What's the follow-up question? So now if we go with Chazal's interpretation, that ultimately what's occurring over here? Yosef is crying over Binyamin's neck, right? Why is Yosef crying over Binyamin's necks? Why is Yosef crying over Binyamin's necks? Quick review. Why? I don't want to have to start the shir over, right? Why? Right? 2 temples which stood in the tribal portion of Binyamin. Binyamin's crying over Yosef's neck. Why? Representing Mishkan in Shiloh. So the Rebbe, again, tonight, we're doing a couple of pieces on the Bava Kachar. The Rebbe asks again, I don't understand. Why is Yosef crying over Binyamin and Binyamin crying over Yosef? You see, I want to just point out to you, there is a deeper message in all of this as well, which is, why was the temple, why was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed? Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred. What destroyed Yaakov Avinu's family? Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred. You know how sometimes in life, when you've had a traumatic episode, and it comes to a lull, things quiet down, but deep down in your heart, it's not over. There's more pain to come. Yosef and Binyamin deep down know there's more pain to come. Sinas Chinam, baseless hatred, destroyed our family. It did. It really destroyed. They had a beautiful reunification for 22 years, but it really did in many levels destroy their family in irreparable ways. Irreparable ways. Yosef and Binyamin realized at that moment, it's not that we had a terrible moment of sinas chinam, baseless hatred, now it's done forever. That baseless hatred, unfortunately, is going to rear its ugly head, many times throughout our historical journey. Sinas chinam, throughout history, we have always been our own worst enemies by hurting one another, hating one another, mistreating one another. So on a deeper level, they're crying over the future misfortunes of Klal Yisrael, but the Rebbe then asks a follow-up question. I don't understand. Why doesn't Yosef, you should cry over what?
Over your Shiloh.
You cry over Shiloh. Binyamin, you cry over what? You cry over the first and second Batei Mikdash. In other words, okay, I got it. Everyone's crying over the Beis HaMikdash. I understand the loss of temples. And now I understand the neck metaphor, because the Beis HaMikdash is the neck of the world. I understand that. But yet we see Yosef is crying over Binyamin's losses. Binyamin is crying over Yosef's losses. Why doesn't Binyamin just cry over his losses? Yosef cries over his losses. We're both crying for the loss of the neck. The metaphorical message is the same, but yet each one is crying for the other. And here the Rebbe advances another incredible life lesson. Look what he writes. Number 11, paragraph Aleph. And again, these lessons are profound, not just for the Parsha, but for life as well. He says, Kasher Adam bocha al davar shemetzik v'koilo. This is amazing. When I cry, if I'm in pain and I cry. So remember again, what does crying do? Or let's say differently, what doesn't crying do?
It doesn't help anything.
It doesn't help anything. He says, Ein bekoach habechi lishanos es hamatzav. One thing is clear, which is crying does not change the circumstances, right? You could cry whatever you want, but crying does not change circumstances. So there's a reality that happened, crying doesn't change that. What does crying do? Crying does have a benefit. Crying helps me unload. It unloads. There's emotion building up behind my dam, right? And when I cry, I allow the dam to burst. It relieves a certain amount of emotional pressure. So what crying doesn't do is it doesn't change the circumstances I'm dealing with. What it does do is, quote unquote, makes me feel better. It relieves some of the emotional tension. Now watch this. Im yeshna afsharos l'takin hadarosh tikun ein makom lebechi ela yesh linkot peula ma'asit uletakin es hataun tikun. So the Rebbe says something absolutely amazing. Therefore, it turns out in life, the only time you should ever cry over something is when? When you can't change it. When you can't change something, and you are forced to contend with a difficult or traumatic or turbulent reality, I can't change it, so therefore, again, I give an outlet for my emotional pain through crying. But the Rebbe says, if you have a life situation which can be changed, do not spend your emotional energy crying. Instead, what should you do? Spend your emotional energy fixing. So the Rebbe says in life, there are two types of problems. There are crying problems and there are fixing problems. The crying problems are the problems I can't do anything about. And there are problems like that in life. I can't change it. There's a reality, circumstances, I cannot change it. But I feel incredible pain. I cry to release some of the tension of my pain. What does the crying do? Doesn't change one little bit of the circumstance, but at least I feel a little bit more relief. Some of the pressure valve has been opened up, some of the pressure has been relieved. But when you could fix the situation, says the Rebbe, do not spend your time, your energy, or wasting your tears crying. Roll up your sleeves and find the resolve to fix. And therefore, says the Rebbe, that's the message here. Paragraph base. Lochein. Kisha'adam roes churban hamikdash haprati shalo ein makom lehistapik bebechi uba'anacha ela alov lehishtada b'chol kolcho v'la'asos es kol hatalui bo kedei livnos es habeis hamikdash bepal. I'm just going to read one more paragraph, then I'll translate. Paragraph Gimel. Rak kisha'adam roa es churban hamikdash shel chavero yakol hu lahashros atzmo lehishtatev b'tzaro v'livkos. So this is amazing. Yosef doesn't cry over his own temple. And Binyamin doesn't cry over his temple. You know why? See, you could cry for the problems of someone else. Why are you allowed to shed tears for someone else's problems? Why? Because I can't fix someone else's problems. This is a very, very, very important idea. Right? I can't fix someone else's problems. So therefore, when someone tells me a problem, maybe I could give advice, maybe I could give an eitzah, some tools, I can't fix your problems. So when I hear about your problems, when I hear about the pain and the difficulties of someone else, the only thing I can give you are my tears. I can give you empathy. I can give you sympathy. I could shoulder the burden of your pain with you, but I absolutely cannot do anything to help you. But when it comes to my own problems, says the Rebbe, do not spend your time crying. Instead, spend your time fixing. And says Rabbi, that's the message here. Yosef cries over Binyamin's loss. Binyamin cries over Yosef's loss. But Yosef doesn't cry over Yosef's loss. Why? Why? Because Yosef says, you know what? I got to do something to fix this. I can't spend my time crying over my lot, crying over my circumstances. I need to roll up my sleeves and do something about it. Binyamin says, I can't cry for my 2 Batei Mikdash. I have to try to do something about it. I can cry over my friend's loss because I can't do anything to fix that. But I can't cry over my own loss because for that I have to save my emotional energy, my emotional reserves to fix it. And the life lesson is obvious, apparent, and profound. Every single day, most of us encounter 2 different types of life problems. We encounter other people's problems, and we encounter our own problems. And when you hear about the problems of another, tears, empathy, sympathy are sometimes the most wonderful things that you could do for someone. You know, there's an interesting halacha. A lot of people don't realize it. You know, there's a concept of Shiva home etiquette, right? What's Shiva home etiquette? So it's interesting. People, in a very well-meaning way, think that sometimes when you go into a Shiva home, the goal is to distract the mourner. Let's talk about anything and everything other than the death of your loved one. As if by somehow distracting them, they're going to forget that they're sitting there in a torn garment on a low stool with no leather shoes, right? There's nothing you could do to distract a mourner from loss, nor are you supposed to. You know what the halacha is? You know what you do in a Shiva home? What's the halacha? You sit. You just sit. You just sit. And if the mourner wants to talk, and it's very uncomfortable, especially if the mourner doesn't want to talk. But Chazal are teaching us an incredible lesson. The greatest gift you can give to someone else is your presence, is your empathy, is your sympathy. I want to tell you something. There is no great pearl of wisdom that you're going to share with a mourner and is going to say, oh, wow, I feel all better now. Right? There's no like incredible life insight. You're going to tell them about the afterlife. And they're going to try to say, you know what? You made me feel so good. I'm happy they're dead. Baruch Hashem, this is incredible. Right? They're mamish in a better place. You're incredible what you did for me. Never happened. Never happened. There's nothing really you're going to say. Why? Because pain is very personal. And pain is a journey. And when you experience the journey of pain, you have to go through it by yourself. The role that other people can play is they could sit down next to you and they could hold your hand. That's what they could do. And they could tell you, I love you, I care about you, I'm here for you for whatever you need. You can give them companionship, you can give them empathy, sympathy, and tears. That's what you give to another person in pain. But what do we do when we're in pain? What do I do when I have a life circumstance that is profoundly broken? That is profoundly broken. So broken. So you have a choice. Choice number 1 is crumble and cry. Crumble and cry. And a lot of people deal with life trauma and life difficulty by crumbling and crying. And again, a good cry is always helpful, always wonderful. But when it's over 30 seconds later, you're feeling the same exact way, and your circumstance has not improved at all. The Rebbe says, with your own circumstances, don't cry. Don't cry, but fix. Try to figure out you're in control. You are the master of your destiny. You are the master of your fate. It is true. You cannot control all of the circumstances, but you absolutely control the processes. When you find yourself in turmoil, do not lose yourself in the dynamic of tears, in the dynamic of woe is me, in the dynamic of I can't believe this is happening. I can't believe life is going through this way, but rather again take a step back, a deep breath, compose yourself, and ask yourself one simple question. How can I fix this? My tears are for my fellow human being. My muscle is for myself. Yosef cries for Binyamin because I feel terribly sad about my brother's loss. Yosef cries for Yosef cries for Binyamin. Binyamin cries for Yosef because each brother feels terrible about his respective brother's loss. But for their own losses, I'm not going to cry. For their own losses, I'm going to fix. And this is an incredibly important lesson in life. Because sometimes when we find ourselves overwhelmed by circumstances, and I think we all do, in different areas of life, in different arenas in life, we find ourselves overwhelmed. And sometimes we feel powerless, especially in the face of incredibly overwhelming circumstances. And so we think the only thing we can do is cry. The only thing I can do is lament this reality. But you learn from Yosef and Binyamin, cry for the other, but use your muscles somehow to ultimately fix your life circumstance. So if we bring this all together, it turns out that from this one little pasuk of brother crying upon the neck of the brother, we emerge with two profound life lessons. Lesson number one is that we have to make sure that our necks are in good working order. We have to make sure that we have clearly articulated beliefs, clearly articulated hashkafas, clearly articulated ideas and ideals. But more important than having beautifully formulated ideas in my mind is making sure that I'm living them, making sure that they are apparent in my behaviors, making sure that I'm actualizing them through the lifestyle I am leading, the home that I am creating, and the family that I am building. Because too often the neck is in a state of disrepair. The head is great, the body is great, but the connection is not there. Yosef and Binyamin teach us to make sure the neck is open. Make sure the neck is the conduit for the ideas and the ideals of holiness, and make sure they're transferring down into the body and become manifest in the way that I live. And lesson number two, always be a compassionate and empathic friend. Always be there for the other. And when you see someone suffering, the greatest gift you can give them is your hand and your tears. But when you find yourself in difficult circumstances, do not waste your tears on your own troubles, because they will not make your life any better or any easier. The tears are for others. When I find myself beset by life challenges, that's a call to action. That's the opportunity to roll up my sleeves and to figure out what I need to do to fix all that is broken in my life. Okay, we'll stop over here for tonight.